news for your Sunday.
Hello, I'm Pat Lawson-Muse. We have been reporting on and hearing about a rise in anti-Jewish attacks in recent months, both around the country and here in the DMV. Today, we talk with local leaders about its impact on our local Jewish community and the community at large. Joining us are Rabbi Shira Stutman from the 6th and I Synagogue in Northwest and Rabbi Amy Schwartzman, Congregation Rodef Shalom in Fairfax County. Thank you both so much for being here this day. Rabbi Stutman, your synagogue was the target of vandalism in December.
Right.
How is your congregation doing now? How are they handling it?
Well, it's certainly not something that they've forgotten about, right? You know, most of our congregation knew that anti-Semitism was on the rise in America. And so in a way, many people articulated that it was a shock, but it wasn't surprising. You know, if you are a person of faith, then your church or synagogue or mosque, that's like a second home to you. And so when that gets attacked, it's like your home being invaded. And so it was really traumatizing for people because it was their space. It was a space they thought they were safe. And they don't feel necessarily less safe physically, but certainly like emotionally and spiritually, it sort of changes their vantage point and their sort of feeling when they walk in the building.
Have you changed anything in light of it?
No, we had already been in the process of hiring a director of security, and so that person has now come on board, but we haven't increased security. We already had pretty well thought out security at 6th and I.
Mm-hmm. Rabbi Schwartzman, Temple Rodef Shalom is the largest Jewish congregation in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You tell us what the mood is among your congregants in light of all that's happening. You yourself have not been a victim.
I have not been, and nor has physically our building, but many, many congregants have been recipients of anti-Semitic slurs, prejudice, actions, and especially our young people. Our public schools are really seeing a great rise in anti-Semitism. Our congregants are in need of support personally. We're also involved in creating a number of programs for our congregation about anti-Semitism. Virginia's Attorney General is coming to our congregation in just 2 weeks, along with the law enforcement of Northern Virginia, to speak to not just our congregation, but the greater area about what's happening and what the Commonwealth is doing to address rising anti-Semitism. And
you recently held an interfaith service where you were mourning victims of the recent mass shooting in Pittsburgh.
That's correct. We so grateful that literally thousands of people came to our building to stand with us. And, you know, we shouldn't talk about anti-Semitism without talking about the importance of our allies. They were there for us. This service of remembrance and support was for the Jewish community, but it also was a time for the greater interfaith community to step up, and they sure did.
What do you both attribute to the recent rise in anti-Semitism? You said, Rabbi Stutman, that it's as old as time, basically.
Yeah.
But why do you think? What are the main contributing factors that you believe are fueling what we've seen recently?
So there are a number of factors. You know, here's the thing about anti-Semitism. It doesn't work exactly the same as a lot of the other hatreds that unfortunately we have in this world. Anti-Semitism tends to boil up whenever there is chaos, right? And this has been true over the course of Jewish history, which, as you well know, goes back thousands of years. And so, you know, Jews are often allowed to be sort of successful in a society, and certainly America has been almost a unique experience for the Jews in terms of our ability to assimilate and participate fully in society. But then when chaos begins to hit, like I think it is hitting right now in our political system, which is just with leaders who are just functioning in ways that are unheard of in recent memory, with climate change, right? With the increasing gap between the rich and the poor, whenever their chaos starts to hit, that's when you start to see anti-Semitism begin to bubble up, and that's what we're seeing right now.
All right. Well, we want to do all we can to tamp it down and to stop it. Rabbi Shira Stutman and Rabbi Amy Schwartzman, thank you so much
for being with us and
sharing your thoughts. We are talking today about the increasing number of anti-Semitic incidents, how they're impacting all of us, and how they're impacting schools and community centers. Joining us now are Gil Preuss, who is CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, and Jeff Danek is Executive Director of the Pozez Jewish Community Center of Northern Virginia. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Gil, first, well, to both of you, how do you two work together? You're a partner organization. You're the sort of umbrella?
Correct. So the best way to describe the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington is a combination of United Way and a community foundation. So we raise money every year and we distribute it to local organizations, including 3 JCCs. Jeff Danek's organization is one of those. We also fund many other organizations, day schools, synagogues in the region.
Okay. Do you, Jeff, see a connection between the uptick, the recent uptick in anti-Semitism and the uptick in hate crimes against other ethnic and religious groups?
Oh, I think they're definitely related. I think that there's been anti-Semitism for thousands of years, and there's been hate for thousands of years. What feels different now is that it's coming, out of the woodwork, and I think people are maybe more anxious about the way things feel in our communities, and so they lash out. And so what is bubbling under the surface, I think, is coming out now more, not just anti-Semitism, but against any other that might be perceived.
Have your members been targeted? You've been vandalized several times.
We've been vandalized. We were victims of anti-Semitic vandalism in the spring of 2017, again in the fall of 2018, and we've also had a bomb threat fairly recently. So we've been dealing with this firsthand, and our members and our guests have been dealing with the anxiety of coming to a building and seeing it defaced in such a heinous way.
Gil, tell us about the groups that you're working with and your approach to dealing with this problem.
So there are several different groups that we're trying to work with. Obviously, we're working within the Jewish community to address the challenges that we face directly from anti-Semitic acts. We're working with other faith communities to try to make sure that collectively across the whole community we come together to address hate of all kinds. And we're also trying to deal directly with any of the attacks that happen to prevent them from happening, looking at improving security within the Jewish facilities. So if someone wants to act out, if someone holds hate in their heart and wants to act on it, that they don't do it because they realize that there will be repercussions.
Jeff, you do a lot of work with children and teens.
We do.
How are they handling what they're seeing in the news and reading on the internet?
So the younger children, it's really not affecting them too much, but it's dramatically affecting their parents in terms of higher anxiety, greater concerns about security. With the teens, they're understanding it more, and we're trying to proactively address that. We recently launched a program with the Anti-Defamation League, the program was sponsored by the Jewish Federation, where we brought teens together from throughout Northern Virginia and launched a program that ADL calls Words to Action. So when a teen encounters an anti-Semitic moment or incident, they have an idea of how to react in the moment and how to deal with it.
And Gil, what are your thoughts about ways to promote better understanding about the issues that impact the community, not just the Jewish community, but the community as a whole?
Right. So first of all, I think we need to regularly talk about it. I mean, I think people sometimes, they may not want to publicly talk about hate or violence, especially if it's conducted by someone, or if it's speech that may be spoken by someone with whom they agree with on other issues. And so we need to be open and say, no matter who conveys the speech, whether they agree with us politically on other issues, we have to condemn it. Because the more times you let something go on without saying, this is hate, this is unacceptable, then it creates room for more people to act on that same behavior.
If I could add one thought to that. When we were struck in 2017, that same night, the Little River United Church of Christ down the street was also hit by the same Nazi vandal. Our other neighbor in the other direction, Bethlehem Lutheran Church, was the victim of graffiti and break-ins, much of which was Nazi or anti-Semitic related, even though they're not a Jewish organization. And the way that all of our communities came together to support one another to stand up against hate of all kinds, regardless of the nature of it or who was victimized, I think has built a real strength within our community.
And that's so important. In fact, we're going to be talking to the pastor you just referred to a little later in this program. Thank you both so much for being with us. Gil Pruse, you're going to stay with us, and Jeff Danek of the Pozez Jewish Community Center of Northern Virginia. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the work that you're doing and for the thoughts that you've shared.
Thank you for the conversation.
Alrighty. And next, how we can all help fight anti-Semitism and other forms of hate in our community. We'll be right back in a minute. We want to take a look now at what's being done to beef up security and what individuals and groups can do to protect themselves against anti-Semitism and the violence. Joining us now is Robert Graves. He is Regional Security Advisor for the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, and Gil Pruse is still with us to participate in this part of the discussion. Robert, Jewish houses of worship and other organizations near and far are understandably feeling vulnerable. How are you helping various temples and synagogues to address that? What's your advice to them? What are you doing to help them?
The Federation, partnered with Secure Community Network, works daily with congregations and other Jewish institutions throughout the community to help them build a culture of safety and preparedness. It begins with doing assessments of their situation, their security posture today, helping them map a way forward, help them develop plans for emergencies. Training is a key factor. We like to train the congregations and the membership to the maximum extent possible. Their individual preparedness as people helps the congregation be more prepared, and that rolls up to better preparation in the community.
When it comes to personal safety, what are some of the things that we can all do, that members who are attending services should do to protect themselves?
The same kinds of things they would do every day in the world. Be alert to their surroundings, pay attention to the people that are around them. When something seems unusual and out of place, to do something about it. Whether it's calling a security guard that's available, calling law enforcement if that's appropriate, or just simply avoiding that hazard if it's a hazard that can be avoided.
Gil, what are your thoughts about having armed guards, police officers in churches and in synagogues and temples, or having congregants armed?
Right. So, first of all, I don't think anyone wants to really live in a world where we have to have armed guards when we go to a house of worship. The problem is that we live in a world right now where it's necessary. Personally, when I go to synagogue, I walk through metal detectors with armed guards who are protecting the synagogue before I can go in and pray. This is not a context that we want to live in, but given the attacks that have occurred over the past months and years in synagogues and churches around the country, it would be a failure on our part to not do this. And so we are looking at how do we increase the number of armed guards across the 160 synagogues that are in the greater Washington area.
Is there debate among them? I would imagine, that in some places people might feel less comfortable with that kind of security in a place like that, while others might feel more secure with the security in place.
So I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, some different synagogues and different organizations will make different decisions for themselves. Some want to have more open doors, some don't. Some know all of their congregants. For others, new people come every week. So different places will make different decisions, and we recognize that. But we also want to make sure that if people want to elevate their security, there are things that they could do regardless of their particular situation, whether it's being able to lock down doors if necessary, or to know how to respond if something does arise in their congregation.
And Robert, what are some the main steps that you recommend to churches, whether or not they want armed security? What is it that you go in and you say, these are the basics that you need to have in place?
Some of the very basic things are as simple as the things we do in our homes, which are locking our doors, knowing who's coming into our, in this case, house of worship, to the extent we can. Where we have guests, the guests we know are great, guests we don't know, let's take a moment to to engage them and get to know them and know that they're there for good purposes and not bad. We help congregations develop their greeter usher programs so they have better tools to do that as well. Having those kind of lockdown procedures for emergencies are also good. Having the plan for what to do in case of an adverse event, whether it's an active shooter or a fire or even something as simple as a medical emergency, and then drilling those kinds of plans with all the membership a couple of times a year at least.
Drills.
Practice.
Yeah. Do you work with other religious groups or people of any faith? Can anyone call you and say, we need security advice?
They're welcome to call me. I'll help them find the right resource for that. I and my team are focused on the Jewish community because we're part of the Jewish Federation.
All right. Well, you're certainly providing a very important service. Robert Graves, Regional Security Advisor with the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington. Thank you for joining us for this part of the discussion. And thank you so much, Gil.
Thank you.
We will continue with a look at interfaith cooperation and how teamwork can help fight hatred in our community. Back in a minute. We are back now with Ron Halber joining us. He's Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington, and Pastor David Lindsay from the Little River United Church of Christ, the church that was mentioned just a few moments ago. Thank you all for joining us, and Gil Preuss for still being with us for this segment. Pastor Lindsay, your church was the one hit by vandals on the same night in 2017 that they hit the Jewish Community Center of Northern Virginia. Have you had any problems since then, and how is your congregation dealing with the issue of violence in places of worship?
Externally, we've been just fine. Since then, internally, we've been having some difficult conversations, as many faith communities, many interfaith communities across the country have, about how to balance the need for security with the need for a sense of sanctuary. And we've had a lot of conversations internally. We're not used to having these conversations, and it's been difficult, sometimes painful. And that's an evolving conversation for all of us, not only as clergy, but for our lay members as well.
You said it's so controversial and so sensitive that you've actually lost members? People have walked away?
We have lost some members. No matter what decision you come to, there's going to be folks that are upset about it.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a lot of folks in our fellowship who are sticking around and having a conversation, but a few have walked away.
Ron, tell us about your relationships with Jewish congregations in the area.
Well, as our job is to be the community relations and public affairs arm for the Jewish community. So just about every synagogue, school, agency in this region is a member of the JCRC, which means we have incredible responsibility to them on many levels, including on the issue of security. So one of the things that we do actively in this era of anti-Semitism is, one, we do an incredible amount of interfaith work, and it makes it much easier when you have wonderful partners.
And government work.
Yes, and government work. On the interfaith front, that makes it wonderful when you have pastors like a pastor who make it easy and are open and open-hearted to what we're doing. And on the government relations level, we spend a lot of time lobbying for government dollars, and the Jewish community throughout the region has received millions of dollars throughout the years to beef up its security, both on a capital level and for purchases and for operating. But we have nowhere near the funds yet that we still need to secure our facilities.
Mm-hmm. Gil, we've talked about a lot of issues here today, but my question is, what can our viewers, can all of us do, regardless of our faith, to help build the bridges that need to be built, to create the bonds that need to be in place to promote peace and mutual respect?
So I think what we can do is at a couple different levels. We live at a time of significant conflict between people. But I think that both on an individual level and also as faith communities, we have important responsibilities. As individuals, reaching out to other people, people that we may not know, people whose opinions may be different than ours, and having a conversation and understanding that sometimes political views may be different, but people are still people. And as faith communities, I actually believe that it is going to be through different faiths that we can rebuild the bonds in this country. The divisions that have been created, I think as individuals we should expect more from our religious leaders to bring together different groups and say we're here for some larger purpose than simply the challenges that we face day to day. And that's where I think we can make a very significant difference.
Ron, how would you answer that?
I think surprisingly, a lot of it is on a human level. I mean, of course, we're all active, like Gil said, we're all active in interfaith relationships and trying to build communities of tolerance. But we have to go beyond tolerance. We have to go to respect, and I think that's a big leap. We've always used the word tolerance. The key issue is respect. We have to respect people for being different and for who they are and where they come from and their background, regardless of what. And at the same time, when tragedy hits, it's important not just because a lot of the faith institutions and a lot of the faith groups are very well connected. However, on a personal level, go up to somebody of a different faith group and say, I think I understand what you must be going through right now, and I just want to let you know that I care about you, and that human level.
Pastor Lindsay, final word, quickly.
The responsibility for ending anti-Semitism doesn't belong with the Jewish community. It belongs with all of us. It belongs with the whole community. And I think as a Christian, part of my responsibility personally and as a pastor is to help uproot anti-Semitism within my own tradition and to help all people build relationships that can foster peace.
All right. All wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. And if you'd like to get some more information about security, we want to let you know that you can reach out to Robert Graves, our previous guest, by logging on to shalomdc.org/security. Thanks so much for being with us. To see any news for your Sunday broadcast, log on to NBCWashington.com and click on Community. I'm Pat Lawson Muse.